Hey y'all, who dat? And welcome in. This is Inside Black and Gold. Gonna hit you with a quick pre-Thanksgiving live stream here to kind of go over a few key details that we learned today heading into a Week 12 showdown with the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, a massive matchup with the Falcons. So wanted to get you all this info before you stuff your faces full of turkey, which I am looking forward to as well. But after I still have to go out to the facility and get all that good stuff because the Saints still practice, so we're still out there. I am Jeff Nowak. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow the show on Twitter. We admittedly need to be better about posting to that Twitter account, but you can follow the show on Twitter at Saints_pod. And today we're just going to get through this quick. Not going to talk much more than we have to, but we're going to get through the injury report, the initial injury report that came out on Wednesday. Second segment, we had an interview with Scott Shanle on Sports Talk this past week, and I thought he had some interesting comments about pressure numbers. So I wanted to dive into what he had to say and whether, that's a viable way for this team to attack the offenses going forward. So we're going to talk about that. Then in the final segment, we're going to hit a quick mailbag, and it's going to be as long as the questions merit. If there's a ton of questions in there, we can get to it. It'll last a while. If not, it'll be quick. So get your questions, comments in there, and we will get to them as many as possible in that final segment. But without further ado, first things first, let's just go through the Saints injury report from top to bottom. So there are the two resting players. They're always resting on Wednesdays. Why? I don't know. But you have tight end Jimmy Graham did not participate with a rest day. He has been inactive for the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever. Doesn't matter. We haven't seen him catch a pass since week 3 in Green Bay. So I assume that will continue. There's no reason to think that he will suddenly be active this week when he has not been active in the past several weeks. So I wouldn't, I've had people saying, oh, is this the week Jimmy Graham finally gets going because the Falcons can't cover tight ends? I don't think so. But, I'd love to be wrong. I would love to be wrong. The other player is Ryan Ramczyk. He's also listed for the rest day, but also a knee. I mean, it's not an injury to the knee. I think when you look at this listing and it says not injury related /knee, it's saying that he is resting because the knee is there and they want to rest the knee. Whatever that means, Ryan's getting another rest day. Beyond that, cornerback Marshon Lattimore did not participate with an ankle injury. So one thing that we should also hit before we go any further, Michael Thomas has been added to injured reserve. That was a bit of a surprise to me personally because that means he's going to be out the next 4 weeks. So even if, the team has been pretty consistent that they expect him to be back and his injury is not expected to be season ending. But I mean, you're in week 12, 4 weeks out, you're talking about a week 16 return. So at best, you are talking about, a final 3 games of the season return for Mike Thomas. So at this point, you're operating under the, impression that he's not coming back, right? Like you can't sit there and say, well, we're going to base our plan around having Mike at the end of the season. At this point, if he gets back, great. But you're going forward, at least I am, under the assumption that he's done for the year. And you're going to, if you get lucky and you can get him back, that's great. But I'm not going to hold my breath based on what we have seen over the last few years and how everything has gone. So Mike Thomas is on IR. That surprised me a bit. Marshon Lattimore did not land on injured reserve, but that does not mean he will not. Dennis Allen hasn't given us any details on what exactly Mike Thomas is dealing with, and he's not giving us any details on exactly what the expectations are for Marshon Lattimore. He's dealing with a high ankle sprain, and what DA didn't roll out today was that Marshon could potentially land on injured reserve by the end of the week. And that's meaningful because if you go on this week, then you can come back in 4 weeks. If you try to wait it out and see how it progresses, then you push that out every week you go, you push it out even further. So if he's not on there by the end of the week, then you would be talking about earliest return week 17 and so forth. So that's going to be something to watch. I would not be surprised at all if you see Marshon end on injured reserve this week. But, as of Wednesday, he is not. So he's still on this injury report with a DMP. Beyond that, that's really the only bit of bad news that we have. Running back Kendre Miller, again, a DMP. He didn't participate last week. He suffered that ankle injury in the win over the Bears. frustrating because it came on a long catch and run. I think you've seen some flashes out of him, and he has been one of the few explosive pieces of this run game this season. And so it looks like you're going to be without him for another week, barring kind of a late week return. Either way, you're not banking on it. The good news is defensive end Isaiah Foskey, who was dealing with a quad injury, did return to practice on Wednesday in a limited capacity. So he's trending in the right direction. I don't know if he'll be active this week, but he's given himself a chance, and that's good. The other, I guess, surprise you would say is a guard / tackle, whatever you consider him right now, James Hurst, dealing with an illness. We don't know what that illness is. Hopefully it's not another one of those cycling through the locker room type illnesses, but he missed on Wednesday, and so his status will be one to watch. The final name on this list, and it is on there, and it's kind of a unique situation because Derek Carr was a full participant in practice, and he wasn't listed on the injury report with a concussion. He was listed on the injury report with, quote, concussion protocol. And so why are you listing him with concussion protocol and not concussion? Well, he was a full participant in practice today. I don't think that there is any question among the coaching staff that Derek Carr is going to be your starting quarterback when you take the field in Atlanta on Sunday. Here's the thing. You have to go through a practice before you can clear the concussion protocol. And once you go through a practice, you have to be cleared by an independent neurologist, and then you can advance out of the protocol. Now, if you are still displaying concussion symptoms, which that would indicate you are on the injury report with a concussion, you cannot go through a full practice. So this is I think this is the Saints kind of just navigating that and saying concussion protocol, clear him, and then we'll move on. But to me, that's an indicator. I think we can stop talking about whether Derek Carr is going to play. Every indication that we've gotten is that Derek Carr is going to play. He didn't talk to the media on Wednesday as he normally would because you cannot do media availability when you are in the concussion protocol. I would expect to talk to him later in the week, but we'll have to see if he clears it on Thursday, if he clears it on Friday, one way or another. That's kind of something to watch. I don't think that you have to sit there and wonder whether he's going to play on Sunday, although I'm sure the Saints would like the Falcons to sit there and wonder. On Atlanta's side of the equation, you have wide receiver Mac Hollins limited with an ankle, quarterback Taylor Heineke limited with a hamstring, cornerback D. Alford limited with an ankle. Friend of the program, David Onyemata, also limited with an ankle, and that'll be one to watch because he didn't play in week 10 against the Cardinals, and ankle injuries can linger. So it'll be interesting to see whether he can get back on the field. Another one, kicker Younghoe Koo, I think I said that name correctly, was a DMP with a back issue, and you don't want to go into a game with a question mark on your kicker, right? You don't want to be in a situation where you need to kick a game-winning kick, and you're like, man, I hope his back doesn't spasm right here. So that'll be one to watch. Who knows? They might have to go sign somebody if he's unable to go. And, Koo has been one of the more consistent kickers in the NFL, particularly in late game situations. So that could be a significant factor for the Falcons. And then the final one, defensive lineman, Calais Campbell, had a rest day. Fully expect him to be out there. So you're trending in the direction of this is going to be a pretty healthy matchup between the Saints and the Falcons. You're not going to have any major injury questions lingering late into the week, barring any continued, additions to this report. But you're gonna go eat a bunch of turkey on Thursday, and you should come back and feel pretty good about where the team sits from an injury perspective. Now, how they play, that is a completely different question, and the Saints are certainly going to be hoping that they can come out and have a much more representative showing than they did again the last 5 weeks, really. And so the two questions that you have are going to be, how do you replace Mike Thomas and how do you replace Marshawn Lattimore? Now, it seems like the Saints are leaning toward keeping Alontae Taylor in the slot and having Ike Yadam kind of take over in nickel on the outside as they did in whatever the amount of weeks where I can't recall off the top of my head when Paulson Adebo was out. Ike Yadam has played really well. You should feel pretty confident in doing that. The only question I have is whether you feel confident that Alontae Taylor is your best option in the slot. And I asked Dennis Allen today how he felt about, Alontae's performance, and this is what he had to say.
Yeah, obviously it was a late switch in camp. What's been your review of Alontae Taylor in the slot for 10 games?
Yeah, I think he's continuing to improve. I think there's obviously still some things that, I'd like to see him do better. But I think he's made significant improvement inside in the slot.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that is what you're going to end up seeing with this team, and they're going to stick behind Alontae. I'm not convinced he is the long-term answer in the slot, so it'll be interesting to see whether they adjust that plan. To me personally, I think you want to either have him play the slot or play outside. I don't want to see him shifting from base to nickel. I want to see either he's your nickel corner or he is your outside corner. Who knows whether they'll do it, but I don't think you're doing Alontae any favors by asking him to add that to his plate. If you're saying you feel comfortable with Ike on the outside, then you should feel comfortable with Ike on the outside in all packages, not just base personnel. Not just nickel personnel. Should be that in base, should be that in dime. Like, just let people do their jobs. If your issue is people aren't doing their jobs, then only give them one job and let them do it. Don't put more confusion on their plate than there has to be. The next question, how do you replace Michael Thomas? Sure sounds like A.T. Perry's going to be that guy, but you did bring back Marquez Callaway. He's going to be wearing number 10, which is going to be kind of weird because his old buddy Traquan Smith is no longer around. That was his number. Alontae Taylor is obviously wearing 1, which is what Marquez wore. 12 isn't on the table. So you got Marquez Callaway wearing 10. He's on the practice squad. He'll be interesting to see whether he is elevated. I imagine he will be because he's not a guy who needs to learn the offense. But with that said, I think A.T. Perry is going to be your guy. I got a chance to talk to him today. It's tough to gauge someone's improvement throughout the course of a season in terms of confidence. But from what, just in terms of how he sounded, how he presented himself, how he spoke about his own game early in the season, I just didn't get a ton of confidence. I felt like this was a guy who was trying to find his way, trying to feel out what his role was going to be, get better, work on his hands, work on his route running. The guy I talked to in the locker room today just seemed like he seemed like an NFL receiver, right? He just seemed like a guy who was a lot more comfortable in his position. He seems like he's bulked up a little bit throughout the course of the season. He looks thicker, I think is a good word. And, I think that it's going to be interesting to see whether he can show up. If you can get reasonable production out of him the rest of the way, maybe 30 something catches, 500 yards. I think this team is much better for it. If you're trying to replace Mike Thomas with just Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, then I think you're going to have a tough go of things. You need A.T. Perry to show up and be, I don't know if threat is the word, but you need him to be an option. You need defenses to have to account for him. And I do think it gives you a jump ball opportunity in these games that you haven't really had. You haven't had that big, long receiver on the field where you could just go give him a chance and let him go up and get the ball. It's what he does best. It's what he did on that touchdown from Jameis Winston, which, we asked him about it. I asked him about it. And he basically was like, I didn't expect him to throw the ball either. I was kind of like standing there by myself like, hey, man, it'd be nice if the ball came my way because I'm alone, but no way he's going to throw it. And all of a sudden the ball's there and he goes up and catches it. And that's what he does. What he did at Wake Forest. It's what he's done for the Saints so far. So if he can be that contested catch guy, then this offense is going to be in decent shape. If you don't have that, right, if you suddenly lose that ability to throw the ball into traffic and your guy come down with it the way that Mike Thomas does better than anybody, then and you're going to be in trouble. But that's it from an injury perspective. It's nice to have short injury report segments, which has been the case even with these injuries this week. I still consider the Saints to be on the right side of the injury bubble in terms of, you're replacing guys, you're dealing with injuries, but you're always going to have some injuries throughout the course of the season. And frankly, you got through 10 weeks before you've had to even consider replacing starters, really. So I think you're in good shape there. But all right, I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about pressure, but more importantly, blitzes. Can you bring additional rushers, and how do you do that? And why haven't you been doing that this year? I think the parallels between right now you're without Marshawn, last year you were without Marshawn are kind of interesting in terms of how you handled it then, how you're going to handle it now. So we'll be right back. This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Ring the bell on YouTube if you're watching there. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're everywhere. Go ahead and do that. Check out WWL.com for the latest news, notes, and analysis. I have a write-up of this injury report on there, so if you'd like to get more information, go check that out. Otherwise, stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak. I'm your host. Steve Geller is hosting a show on WWL Radio right now, or at least he will be in about 40 minutes. So if you want to go check that after this is done, you go for it. We're giving you this quick pre-Thanksgiving live Inside Black and Gold podcast. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. We're going to talk about blitzing, right? We're going to talk about pressure in this segment. We were able to chat with Scott Shanle on WWL this week, former Saints linebacker. And I thought he had some interesting things to say in terms of how this defense is operated, what they need to do better. And so without further ado, let's hear from Scott.
What's up with us? So we like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. What are we doing in the first half versus the second half? Now, hopefully Desmond Ridder, whoever's playing with Atlanta, then all of a sudden we dig ourselves a hole in the first half. If we look forward to the last 5 games, they've dug themselves into a double-digit hole before halftime. And before you know it, a makeshift lineup on the offensive backups, considering who you're playing with the Vikings. We're down 24-3. I've never been so frustrating because that's supposed to be that's supposed to be our strength of our team is our defense.
Yeah, there's no question. And for some reason, the defense played like the Dome Patrol when the offense was struggling. Then the offense gets going a little bit, and the defense exhales and takes a break. Like, come on. Can we just get 2/3 of the offense, defense, and special teams to play well? If you do that, you're going to win a lot of games because I'm right there with you. Last week's game was severely disappointing to me. Cam Akers tears his Achilles. No Jefferson on the field. Hawkinson's out there with
no Kirk Cousins
or whatever he had. No Cousins. and you know what? This is not a slight against Josh Dobbs. I said journeyman quarterback don't become franchise quarterbacks and look like Mahomes in 1 week. Like,
he was 1-9 as a starter.
yeah, exactly. There's a reason why 6-7 teams told him, yeah, we're good, but he found a way to do it. This is professional football. Everybody's playing. Every day's an interview. Everybody's playing for their job every single day. And to his credit, he played great. But I was really frustrated with the way the Saints showed up in that game because the defense should have played better against that offense. When you just look at it personnel-wise, even if the Saints offense went back to struggling, I was just surprised that the defense played that way against that offense.
Now, Scott, what is your take? Because you've been part of schemes and how you want to rush the passer. And they get Jason Pierre-Paul, the new Haitian sensation. Used to be Junior Gillette. Then we had to run him off. That belt incident on the beach. But anyway, that's a different story. But I'm looking at I am kind of surprised the lack of production. Might say, oh, Weber, you got to look at the quarterback hurries, quarterback hits and all that. But right now with 18 sacks, and we've been in the past where we've been high 40s, low 50s in sacks, but now with only 18, we're truly not affecting the opposing quarterback. That's why I think they want to see maybe if Jason Pierre-Paul can make a difference.
There's no doubt about it. There's 2 things in the NFL that you can never have enough of, and that's guys who can rush the passer, and that's guys who can cover. If you can find good guys who can cover out sitting on their couch, which you really can't, or you can find guys who can get after the passer, you got to sign them. And so I'm right there with it. Jason gives you a NASCAR package where him and Granderson and Cam come in on 3rd down and they're rushing all together, and that's what his role is. And, I think that's a positive signing. So I think if Jason give you anything, it's definitely a need because guys have not been winning enough one-on-one. And schematically, I'm kind of sick of seeing a three-man rush. I don't want to see any more three-man rush. I want to see some heat. I want to see a five-man pressure. No. And this is I don't understand, and it's going to be hard because I think if Dennis was arguing back with me, he would say, well, why should we blitz? We're taking the ball away. And that's probably why they're not blitzing a bunch, because they're taking the ball away.
That makes sense.
But and that would be his argument as to why they're going more coverage. But to me, when you can speed up a quarterback and disrupt him and get him off his timing game, that's how you play winning football. And I don't think we did that enough last week against Dobbs, bringing 5 and 6. When we did bring 5 and 6 guys, he didn't do anything. So I think we need to get back to pressuring. My last point about that is part of me thinks he is protecting our safeties a little bit. Both our safeties, I don't think they're the best cover guys.
Amen.
And anytime we've gone pressure, those guys can get exposed in coverage, and I think he's kind of protecting them.
Well, not Malcolm Jenkins, Marcus Williams. That's for sure.
That like Charlie and I was talking about this, Scott. That listen, not against Honey Badger. We love him at LSU, but there's a reason he got older and Kansas City wouldn't pay him. But Marcus May and Tyrann Mathieu, they don't have the consistency you have with Malcolm Jenkins and Marcus Williams back there.
No, and I'm right there with you, Bobby. I think Tyrann has been a heck of an NFL player, and I loved him coming back home, and I think it's a great story. But at this point in his career, he's more of a slot guy down in the box, maybe make some plays closer to line of scrimmage. But you saw last week Hawkinson. If anybody saw him route up Marcus May's not a great cover guy either. So you have really two safeties that can't really cover anybody. So what do you do as a defense coordinator? If you blitz 6 guys, that means those 2 have somebody man-to-man, or they're covering somebody one-on-one. And my issue with that is, if you are adjusting your defense based on a couple of guys, then, go penny package where you put in Alante for Tyrann or, somebody else who can cover, but you can still get after the quarterback and be more multiple. We haven't been as multiple defensively as we've been in the past.
If I remember I remember to unmute before I started talking, even though it took me a little while. So this is progress, everybody. But all right, so yeah, that was Scott Shanle, and I thought there was a couple really just interesting things he said there. One, you hear about dime, you hear about nickel, you don't hear a lot of penny. You don't hear about a lot of penny packages, and if you're wondering what that is, it's typically a package you go to. It's a sub package talking about 3 down linemen. So 2 ends and a nose, 3 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs, which is kind of unusual. But if you are kind of scrambling and you're trying to cover mobile quarterbacks, maybe that is the best option. And maybe instead of, I don't even know what the package would be called. You'd have 6 DBs instead of, just Pete. So you have 3 down linemen, 2 linebackers, and 6 DBs. But either way, it is an interesting idea. And I do think that you could serve from being more aggressive in terms of how you're bringing pressure. Now, if you recall, last year, Caden Ellis really didn't see the field that much until Pete Werner went down with his injury. And, I think the Saints probably would have loved for that to not happen in terms of, it's a lot easier for the Falcons to justify dropping a bag on his head if, he goes out there and has 7 sacks, which is what he did. And that coincided with Marshawn going down for 10 games. And so I think you are in a very similar situation this year in terms of, okay, we need to generate pressure. We cannot allow defenses to just tee off on our secondary when Marshawn's not out there because, as good as Ike has played, as good as Paulson has played, as good as Alante has played on the outside, they're not Marshawn. So teams are going to be more confident. They're going to attack it. And so how do you counteract that? Well, you generate pressure. You find ways to bring pressure in, to bring an extra rusher, right? And whether that comes from the slot, whether that comes from the linebacker level, whether that's a NASCAR package where you're just adding a rusher that way. Maybe you have 5 linemen on the field and you add Jason Pierre-Paul and it's just a 5-man pressure with linemen. You got to find ways to do that. And so I went and I looked up just the basic numbers here. So the Saints have blitzed 23.3% of dropbacks. That's middle of the road in the NFL. That's not all, it's not at the bottom. It's probably it's in the mid 20s, low 20s, right? So it's nothing crazy. And this, I see people a lot of the time saying, okay, well, why not bring pressure? Well, in most cases, blitz heavy schemes are that way because you have to blitz. It's not because you want to blitz, it's because that's the only way you can generate pressure. And right now, it feels like that is gonna be the way the Saints generate pressure. So I would advocate for more of that. Now, you can talk about hurries, you can talk about pressures, but I look at knockdowns. I look at, are you affecting the quarterback? Are you hitting him? Because I want to be hitting the quarterback. I don't want to just be making him react, because in today's NFL, a majority of the quarterbacks in the NFL actually get better under pressure, right? They get better when they get flushed out and they can extend. I want you to put them on their back. And the Saints have 25 knockdowns this season through 10 games. That's nothing. That's 2.5 knockdowns a game, right? Like, that's nowhere near where you should be. You are not affecting the quarterback. You're not hitting the quarterback. I want to hit him. I want to make him aware that I am there. 25 knockdowns is good for 27th in the NFL, and that is not good enough. And I don't know how you get there. I don't know how you scheme up some blitzes that you have not shown yet, but I think this is when you really start to do that. And to Dennis Allen's credit, I think he is aware of this, right? I think that is something you're going to see this week. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for some more creative blitz schemes in the next week or so in terms of how you do that, and especially as long as Marshawn is out. So if you're wondering how the blitzes have broken down, the Saints player who has blitzed the most this season is Demario Davis. He has 29. Pete Werner is right behind him with 28. Alontae Taylor has blitzed from the slot 17 times. Zach Bond 8 times. Tyrann Mathieu 5 times. Marcus May 5 times. Jordan Howden 2. And then a handful of other players, right? Lonnie Johnson, Paulson Adebo, Marshawn Lattimore all have 1, right? And so to me, you look at it and you say, okay, where can we generate pressure? And I think it's time to find a way to get Zach Bond involved in the pass rush more, because that's what you saw last year with Caden Ellis, right? I don't think Zach can cover the way Caden could, and that limits what you can do with him to an extent. But I do think that Zach, just at the end of the day, Zach's best ability is getting upfield, right? Being an on-ball linebacker. And so find ways to get him upfield rushing the quarterback. I'm tired of seeing him on the field and trying to cover. Like, I don't want to see it. Drop in a zone, let him rush the quarterback. Play more zone. Like, one of the reasons you don't play zone is because Marshawn is an elite man-to-man corner. You don't have him out there. Find ways to play zone. Paulson Adebo's interception against the Bears, where he just stepped in front of Cole Kmet. They were playing zone, right? This team can play zone. And if you're struggling to get to the quarterback, you're struggling to take the quarterback down as he escapes the pocket, one of the ways you can limit that is to play more zone. So I think it's time that you play more zone. All right. There's a few other things. JPP, we talked to him in the locker room today. I am interested to see how they deploy him. I'm interested to see how quickly they can get him up to speed, because I think he does still have something to give. I think this team likes Jason Pierre-Paul. And here's what DA had to say about him today after his first practice.
Yeah, I thought he looked good today. The one thing he's got is he's got skins on the wall. He's got, pedigree. He's really an instinctive player. He understands the game. So I thought he had good practice today, and hopefully we'll get to continue to evaluate him and see where he's at.
Yeah, I don't know how much he's going to play this week, right? That's a pretty quick turnaround in terms of what you're asking a guy to do. But as you go forward, you're talking about a team with 18 sacks on the year. Not enough. It's not enough. You're not generating enough pressure from the front four. And I think if you can start to do that, if you can start to get in the mind of the quarterback more than just, okay, well, we're trying to pin you in the pocket, then you can have more success, particularly early in games. I'm okay in the second half if you want to play a little bit more conservatively from a pass rush perspective and just force them to beat you in the opening possession, in the first quarter, in the first half. I want you to affect the quarterback, right? Too many of these games have started with a guy just sitting there picking you apart because you're just, I don't know. To me, that's been the biggest issue, is the Saints team has not been aggressive enough early in games. So hopefully, they do what Scott says, and I agree. You do that. One thing that I disagree with Scott on, in part, is I don't think it's necessarily both of your safeties that have been a problem. I do think Marcus May is not good enough in coverage to do what you need him to do. And when I say that, I mean, you replaced Marcus Williams and Malcolm Jenkins, right? You replaced a center fielder with a shortstop in Marcus. Like Marcus Williams was an elite center field type safety. You had a guy who could range from sideline to sideline, make plays on the ball, and you never replaced that. Like I'm okay with what Tyrann Mathieu has done and what he can do in terms of he's a leader in that defensive room. You needed that. He's a veteran. People rally around him. He makes plays on the ball. He's in the right place constantly. Sure, he's still 5'7". Like you can only do so much. He is, on the backside of his career. So you're not getting 2017 elite Super Bowl caliber Tyrann Mathieu, but you are getting a very good football player. The problem is the skill set behind him is redundant. You have Marcus May, who is not a good enough cover safety to play center field. And that's always been the case. And as you look at how it's developed, I think Jordan Howden is the better option there. I know why you're playing Marcus May. He has a couple interceptions. He does find himself in the right place at times, but I just don't think you've gotten enough out of him. And I would love to see more Jordan Howden reps in the regular defense. I think this defense was better when he was in there. When Marcus was suspended. I mean, look at the numbers. This whole 5-game stretch where you didn't have Marcus May. I'm sorry, this whole 5-game stretch where you haven't been able to stop teams in the first half. You know what that has coincided with? Marcus May coming back from suspension, right? I just don't know if he's doing enough. And I would love to see Jordan Howden get more run at safety. And I agree. Well, part of the reason you were running your defense the way you are is to protect your safeties. But I do think it is more about one than the other. If you want to look at coverage grades, like I don't have an issue with how Tyrann has played. Some people do. Some people are going to have unrealistic expectations for a 32-year-old safety. I have higher expectations for Marcus May than what I've seen. So either he has to play better, or I think you replace him and you find a way to get a little more athletic, a little more, I don't know, center fielder in that safety role. Because if you're going to blitz more, you're going to have to expose your safeties, and they're going to have to hold up in coverage. And every time I hear Marcus May's name, it's either he's getting a lucky interception tipped his way, or he's screwing up. Right? There was a 4th down play where he just ignored the quarterback and allowed him to run because he got lost in coverage. He got eaten alive by TJ Hawkinson time after time after time in that game. I think it's time for a Marcus to either play better or take a back seat to the rookie because I think the rookie has played well, and I think his upside is a lot higher. So to me, that's where you're looking at. Hopefully this team can find a rhythm on defense and get things going because it has to start this week. Like mathematically, this is not a must win, right? Like you can lose this game and still feel, you lose this game, you're still tied for first in the NFC South. But I don't think you look at this mathematically. You look at this philosophically and emotionally, and a loss to the Falcons this week would be devastating. It would feel devastating. It would be demoralizing. It would be just around the same as your loss to the Bucs in week 13 last year, right? So you cannot afford to lose this game. And so do what you have to do. Find a way. Change things up. You're going against Ryan Nielsen, a guy who knows your scheme. You got to get creative. You got to find ways to catch him. You can't play a game that he knows you're going to play. You got to find ways to adjust. And so hopefully they're going to be able to do that on offense and defense. We're obviously talking about defense here more so than offense. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. We're going to come back. We're going to hit a quick mailbag. There's some questions in there, not a ton. So if you want to throw more questions in, you want to get them answered, do that. Send them my way in the comments feed, and we will talk about them. Again, I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. This is going to be a quick live mailbag getting ready for week 12. This is a pre-Thanksgiving edition of this podcast. So I just, I like food. I'm excited for tomorrow. I'm sure you are too. We still have a couple more Saints practices getting ready for week 12. But, there's going to be some questions we can get into. So let's start right there. Goonie 300 says offense/defense is so outdated. And I agree with this on the offensive side of the ball. I think you would love to see more RPOs. You would love to see more play action, more motion. That's all fair game to me. I think that is more than accurate. And, as much as I think Pete Carmichael is a good coach, Pete Carmichael is a good football mind. I don't think even if you find success at the end of this season and you make a run in the playoffs, you do whatever, I still think you need to replace him as the offensive coordinator. I thought you need to replace him last year as the offensive coordinator, at least in terms of as the play caller, but that's neither here nor there. I don't think the defense is outdated. I really don't. Like, I think people confuse creativity with success. And it's like, some of the best defenses, go back and look, they're not doing crazy things. They're running their base defense throughout the entire game, and you have to beat it. And until you do, they're not going to change. Like, you don't have to get creative on defense if you're winning with your base package, right? Like, you want to be able to just rush 4 and drop 7 and make life miserable on opposing quarterbacks. What you have to be able to do in those circumstances is get pressure with your front 4. And I think what this team has gotten a bit too comfortable with on the defensive side of the ball is saying we trust our secondary, we trust our corners, we can play man-to-man. But, and that's working, right? Like, you talk about the issues containing quarterbacks, right? Well, if they were able to throw, they would throw, right? Like, you're talking about guys scrambling because they have to scramble, they have to extend plays. And the issue is you have not been able to stop them from extending plays, which to me is like, okay, so you're winning, you're getting the looks you want, you're just not getting the production out of your front 4 that you have to get, particularly to finish plays. And to me, that's got to change. And, while you would love to not have to send extra pressure, at a certain point, you do lose that ability, you lose that option. And I think the Saints are there right now because 18 sacks through 10 games is just nowhere near good enough. But I appreciate the comment. Danny T04 says, I honestly think the Saints will not show up in ATL because they didn't show up in Minnesota against Jadis Pinkett Smith Dobbs. I don't get the joke. Oh, is that an alopecia joke? That's not funny. I'm not even going to answer that question. Sorry. Let's see. Goonie 300 says, we just line up and play man-to-man and think we're going to win like that. Yeah, I mean, I think you do need to mix in more zone. I agree with that too. Let's continue. St. John Butler says, Myles Garrett has 13 sacks. Our entire defense has 18. Time to dial up the heat. Yeah, it would be nice to have Myles Garrett. That's part of the frustration is, this is a team that wants to generate pressure with this front 4 and has invested heavily in being able to generate pressure with the front 4, right? Like, there's a reason you went out and drafted defensive ends in the first round. There's a reason you went and aggressively got Marcus Davenport. There's a reason you went and aggressively, and drafted Peyton Turner in the second round this last season. The issue is you've just not gotten production out of any of those players. And yes, you do need to look long and hard at your evaluation process in terms of what defensive ends you're bringing in. I still have high hopes for Isaiah Foskey. I'm not giving up on Isaiah yet. I think that he was in line to have an increased role, and then that quad injury happened at a very inconvenient time. And you've just, this has been a very frustrating few games. And hopefully, as we talked about, he's back practicing on a limited capacity. Hopefully he can get back. But yeah, I mean, it's been rough. And, Peyton Turner again, that one's tough because I actually think that Peyton Turner has it within him to be a good defensive end in the NFL. He just can't stay healthy. And, that's the frustrating part. You can say, well, there's no way to know that a guy's going to get hurt other than the track record in college of getting hurt. But But at the same time, it's like, stop drafting injury-prone defensive ends. Stop drafting defensive ends who have dealt with injuries throughout college. And, it's tough because I think Brian Brzee, I think that has been a pick that looks really good. And he was an injury-prone defensive lineman. So, that's what you're going to say is, well, it worked there. It didn't work there. So I don't know. But it is frustrating. You do need to generate more pressure up front. And that's been a roadblock to your success this year. And I think they lucked out in terms of Carl Granderson has been a lot better than you probably anticipated. But even then, it's like, yeah, he's been very good for a UDFA defensive end out of Wyoming who has developed and gotten better and better and better. The best defenses in the NFL, they have guys like Myles Garrett, and TJ Watt and guys like that, guys that are these elite players that you brought in to be that guy. And so, yeah, I that has probably been the biggest frustration of this season for me. Corvette BMW, they can't find a play for Jimmy Graham. No, apparently they cannot. And I said the other day that I'm done talking about it because it's just not worth it, because it's clear. Like, if you were going to find plays for Jimmy Graham, you would have done it by now. And, to me, it looks like if Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau are healthy, and to a lesser extent Taysom Hill in terms of your tight end room, you're not going to see Jimmy Graham. Because if you were going to see him, you would have seen him. And the frustrating thing is, wouldn't Jimmy Graham have been real nice to have on the field for that Hail Mary against the Vikings? Probably. But no, I don't think they can or are going to find a play for Jimmy Graham. Tim Fabenro says, Jeff, have you seen that chart that shows how far behind our offensive play calling is in the NFL? We are last, and yet we don't need to change right now. It's maddening. Well, okay. So that chart, I've seen that chart over and over again. It assumes that there is a set metric for what that you can grade offensive play calling in terms of being better or worse. And so there's that. I know exactly what chart you're talking about. And what I don't disagree that the Saints play calling is archaic in a sense, but like, you also, I think play calling is overrated at points. Like, at a certain point, you just need the players to win. They need to win on their routes, and they need to make catches, and they need to make blocks. They need to find seams. And so you can say it's on the play calling, but that chart itself is very self-aggrandizing in the sense that it's talking about this play calling metric that has been established based on the types of calls that are correct, that are an addition to your chance to win. And then it is using the y-axis to grade the easy button usage, which is RPOs, play action, motion, that sort of thing. But the problem with that is you're using the same variable to grade. So it makes it seem worse than it is, because you're talking bottom left-hand corner, top right-hand corner. And so it's doubling down on its own success in saying, like, this is the right thing to do. So you're using both axes to indicate that, which is why, yeah. So if he was last in that metric, he's going to be last in that metric, which means he's there. And if you're first, so it doesn't really change anything. It might as well be a straight line. And yes, I agree that, Pete Carmichael has not been getting the job done, but neither have the players, neither has the scheme. So, and again, it's not like, I agree that you probably should have made a change this last offseason. You probably should make a change this offseason, but there's nothing you're going to do in season that's going to substantively change that. You're not going to completely rebuild your offensive scheme. You're not going to completely rebuild your playbook in season. So no, I don't think that making a change now would be helpful. But I do think that it's an interesting metric. I just question this idea that it's not like there's a yes answer and a no answer. It is the spectrum of what the correct thing would be. And that chart is assuming that anyone knows that in every circumstance. And that's just not true. But I think it's interesting. If you haven't seen it, you should go check it out. Here's another one. It says, I would agree with you. If we didn't call shot plays and we were only down by 8 with 10 minutes left at the 50-yard line, make sense. See, this I agree with 100%. Especially in that game in particular. So I differ in the idea of I'm okay with shot plays in situations that might not look like a shot play situation, right? Third and 13, right? No one's complaining about that shot play because it worked. And that's my criticism is if you're going to complain about shot plays, complain about the ones that work because it's the same principle. You're doing the same thing. You were in the same situation against Tennessee and you ran a shot play and it worked. You were in the same situation against Carolina. You ran a shot play and it worked to close out both of those games. You were in a virtually the same situation against the Colts. You ran a shot play and it worked and you closed out that game. Now, against the Vikings is a very different situation because you went into that game with a game plan. You got down by 20, 21, 24 points in the third quarter, and then you threw out your entire game plan, right? You threw out the entire, I think we talked to Mark Schlereth on Sports Talk, and he mentioned that, it feels at times like offensive coordinators are looking for every excuse possible to get away from the run. And that's what it felt like happened in that game in terms of, you're down 24 and you're like, we got to make something happen. We got to make something happen. And I think the Saints almost forgot that it's like there's a point where if we're only down one score, we play like we're down one score. We don't play like we're down 21. And they never got out of that mode. And so in that game in particular, I agree. There was no reason to be taking shots from midfield when all you needed to do was get a couple first downs. And I agree. I think Pete, I was a lot less critical of Pete at the beginning of the season because I think the way the offense was operating actually made a little bit more sense and you were finding your way. The problem is the offense hasn't adapted throughout the course of the season. It has been stubbornly the same. And, you've seen things change in spurts, but it just feels like I just don't see Pete as having the ability to create a game plan and have that kind of mold itself to a game situation as a game develops. I think that more responsibility should be put on Derek Carr at the line, right? And obviously that's not an answer for the Vikings game because I think that's what has been happening in games throughout the course of a game is Derek is kind of leading that in terms of the second half adjustments and how you're operating down the stretch of games, especially in the tempo. And with Jameis, it just didn't happen that way. And that's why it just seemed very stubborn in that game because that's just not what happened. And if you go and you look at how these games have gone, typically the Saints offense has improved as the game has gone on. The Titans win, the Colts win, the Texans game, right, where you made a run in the second half, the Jags game where you made a run in the second half, even the Vikings game to an extent. It kind of got bogged down. So I don't know. I agree with you. It's frustrating. But again, I just don't see how it's like making a play caller change right now would help you because it's not like you're bringing anybody in. You're bringing in another person from the same offense who already has that infrastructure in their brain. So yeah. Either way, I think you're gonna learn a lot about this team this week. And if they can't figure it out, if the offense just gets stuck in the mud again, then maybe you do make a change. But I just don't see it unless you have to do it. I don't think you're gonna do it. All right, let's get to a few more. Thanks, Tim, for the questions as always. Danny T. The issue is tackling too, ? Especially at the linebacker position. Pete can't play coverage. Now, it's funny because I would tend to agree in terms of there are moments throughout a game where it feels like they forget how to tackle. And there are big missed tackles, right? There are missed tackles that end up leading to 20, 30-yard gains that shouldn't exist. But it's less about tackling. It's more about angles, I think. Because you don't see the Saints, it's like you talk, well, what's a missed tackle, right? It's a chance it's a tackle that should be made that you blow. It's not a tackle that you never get to, right? And so you look at the numbers and the Saints, they've missed 41 tackles this year. That's not that many. You're talking about, less than 4 per game. That's not a ton of missed tackles. I think it's 26th in the NFL in terms of, so you're not missing tackles when you get to them. You're just not getting the proper angles. And that's a team speed issue. And I've talked about this before. You got to find ways to fix that. And I just don't know how you do that in season. And I think, but like we talked about, more zone You're then putting people in position to break from the top down as opposed to chase, and that's just not something this defense has done traditionally. Maybe you can get into that more because you're already playing at a disadvantage without Marshawn. Maybe you can make some adjustments there that help you down the stretch. But, it's funny. I looked that up expecting to see the missed tackle number be a lot higher, and it actually isn't that high. And again, I think it's more about angles than actual tackling. But it's interesting. Goonie 300 again. Mickey and Dennis Allen are content with just winning a horrible division. And I don't see the issue with being okay with winning a horrible division. You should want to win your division. You're not like I don't understand the dream of being bad. Like there's this pie in the sky idea of I want to rebuild so that maybe in 10 years we can be back to this point, but be slightly better. The answer is you go find a quarterback, you get that quarterback, but it's not as simple as just bringing in a quarterback. There's no sign hanging over their head saying this is the franchise quarterback, right? Like you're just as likely to get that top pick and draft, I don't know, Sam Darnold as you are a CJ Stroud. And the fact is the Saints aren't going to get into that position unless they completely tear down the entire roster. And then you have unwatchable season after unwatchable season after unwatchable season. It's not better. It's not. And people say, well, they should. It worked for the Texans, and the Texans are in a very good position right now, but the Saints are nowhere near where the Texans were going into this season, right? First of all, the Texans had 3 failed seasons. They had 3 seasons worse than any the Saints have had in the last 15, 16 years. Like, so dropping to the bottom of the barrel, it's not a one season and done thing unless you luck, no pun intended, into Andrew Luck, like the Colts did, where Peyton Manning had neck surgery and then they just happened to be the worst team in the NFL, got the number 1 pick, and then he had a no-brainer first number 1 overall pick, right? That doesn't happen. That's luck. That is dumb luck for luck. And anyway, I'm sorry, I need to stop saying luck. Either way, you're way more likely to end up in the situation the Panthers are in, where the guy you want is at the top and you go get him. What I will say for the Saints is I don't think Gail would force anything. I don't think that's not the type of owner she is. And you'll go from there. But I'm okay with winning a division. I want to root for a team that wants to go out and win its division. I don't know. Like I think there are issues that you need to fix, but I don't think intentionally creating a situation where your team should go out and lose because they are not good enough to win is the answer, personally. All right, let's see. Got another few more in here. This guy's name is Drew388 Hater. Says, I'm going to go be so pissed if we draft another lineman in the first round. Why? I don't understand that either. Like look at the teams who have drafted well historically, and they're the teams that draft linemen in the first round. They're not the sexy picks, but like I think teams that go out and draft skill positions in the top 10 are go show me that, other than maybe Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, which was just a no-brainer slam dunk. These guys were stars in college. They're going to be stars together in the NFL. That made sense. In most cases, not drafting a lineman in the top 10 is a mistake. Look at the Jags taking Leonard Fournette. Look at the Giants taking Saquon Barkley. Look at the Falcons taking Bijan Robinson, which, there's still time, but I think they're going to regret that greatly. Like, look at the Falcons taking Kyle Pitts, right? Like, that's where you're able to build. You're either taking a quarterback, you're taking a lineman, or you were taking a defensive back. Like, those are the three, I guess 4 positions, because you're talking offense, defensive lineman. Those are the 4 positions that you really can only find in the first round in terms of no-brainer blue chip prospects. Like, everything else is a get him in the system and see if we can develop him into a starter. but you can find skill position players in the mid rounds. Alvin Kamara was a 3rd round pick, right? Like there's a whole mess of options outside of the 1st round for all these other positions, and you should be drafting linemen in the 1st rounds. The problem is not that the Saints have drafted. The problem is not the positions the Saints have targeted in the draft. The problem is the production from the players you've targeted in the draft. And so you look at Jeff Ireland, you look at all this. One of the things that I am annoyed with is we talked to Jeff Ireland at the Senior Bowl, and they say, he says, I like dual threat quarterbacks. I am the scouting director for this team. And what kind of quarterback do I want? A dual threat quarterback. Well, you go out and you draft Jake Haener. Like, either you admit that is the way to go, or it's not. But saying that and then not drafting the dual threat quarterback makes no sense to me. But all right, let's wrap this up. I appreciate everyone who came in here, dropped a comment. I know everyone's kind of getting ready for Thanksgiving, and I am as well. I'm very excited. I'm going to be eating dinner across the wall. My neighbor has invited us over, so we're going to be doing that. So I hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving, and I hope everyone enjoys plenty of turkey or whatever your vice is. Vice of choice is. Enjoy the day and enjoy football. The Saints aren't playing. They cannot ruin your day. You are safe. You are safe from that this year. So I know I'm happy about it. I am curious. Do people like watching the Saints on Thanksgiving? I actually kind of prefer when my team is not playing on Thanksgiving, because I like to watch football, but I don't like to be stressed. And watching the Saints, if anything, is stressful. So, enjoy that. Enjoy whatever it is you like to enjoy. And thanks as always for listening to Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. Subscribe. Hit me up on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. Check out the latest news, notes, analysis on WWL.com and listen. If you can't watch the game, listen to the game on WWL. I'll be on there. Be headed out to Atlanta, standing on the sideline this weekend. I've been out to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium several times. I've never watched a game from the sideline, so I am excited about that. And hopefully the Saints can give you something to get excited about. All right, y'all. Happy Thanksgiving. Be easy. Peace.